Welcome to the Teaching Journeys Podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Heather Pillar. Heather Pillar, photographer and teacher, has lived, taught, and photographed in 7 countries over 4 continents during the past 25 years. Her personal and collaborative photographic projects reveal her ongoing interest in women, girls' education, and aging. In 1995, Heather collaborated with Morrie Schwartz during the last 6 months of his life as he battled ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. Her first monograph, Memento Morrie, Images of Love and Loss, illustrates Morrie's philosophies through photographs of him interacting with family, friends, and caregivers and building community. Over a quarter century later, Morrie's wisdom resonates with people around the world due to the best-selling memoir Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. Morrie taught people, including Heather, how to live fulfilling lives with love. Heather's photographs have been exhibited internationally, as well as published in numerous newspapers and magazines such as People magazine and the Boston Globe. Books include The Wisdom of Morrie, Tuesdays with Morrie, and Morrie in His Own Words. Her work has also appeared on television, CBS Sunday Morning, The Today Show, and online, NPR, Next Avenue, and on PBS's Inside East Street. Heather, welcome to the Teaching Journeys Podcast. It is a pleasure having you on the program today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me, Dave.
Well, you're welcome. I have to share that we have an upstate New York connection, a Utica, New York connection. I've been born and raised in Utica, New York, lived here all of my life. When I reached out to Heather, I initially found out about Heather through Rob Schwartz because I had interviewed Rob on the book, the last manuscript that he edited that his dad wrote, The Wisdom of Morrie. And he had mentioned you very prominently at the end of the podcast. I was nudged to reach out to you to see if you would be interested in being a guest, and the rest is history. But just proof that my world gets smaller, there is that Utica, New York connection. I know your dad lives here.
In New Hartford, and my sister as well.
If you ever get up to the New Hartford area, the central New York area, look me up and hopefully we can meet in person.
No, that'd be great. That'd be really great.
So I have several questions for you, particularly centered around your photography and particularly around the monograph that was published last year, Memento Morrie. So if you're ready, we'll just get right to it.
Yes, please.
Okay. My first question is, tell our audience about the experiences or events that inspired you to embrace the world of photography.
So really, it was high school photography class, and shout out to high school teachers because I am one. And I just loved the medium, and I didn't lean into it because I thought, like, how does one become a photographer, and would you actually make money? And then years later, I graduated and I ended up in Boston, Massachusetts. And my first job was at a public relations agency, and we hired a photographer. I was 23 at the time, and he said, sometimes I need an assistant on nights and weekends. And, I would learn more about photography, and that's what I'm like, yes, happy to do that. The pay was supposedly $50 an hour, but it really wasn't. I ended up being a stringer, a freelancer for United Press International and the Boston Globe. I worked at some daily newspapers, and I caught the bug. I'm a little bit of a news junkie. I follow the news a lot, and sports, the Celtics were winning at that time, the Red Sox, Mike Dukakis was running for president, so it was kind of an exciting time to be a photographer in Boston.
Yeah, and also I'm a big Celtics fan too, so that's another point in the plus column for you, Heather.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not a Red Sox fan, but
Oh.
I am a Yankees fan, so just for the record.
Ah, okay.
But hopefully we could still be friends.
I'm not really, I don't follow so much anymore, but it was
Yeah.
the time.
Well, yeah, you look at the time when you're talking about Mike Dukakis running for president, the Celtics were winning, the Red Sox made that unbelievable comeback to end their World Series drought. So it was an exciting time back then.
Yeah, it was really great.
Let's get to how you met Morrie Schwartz and talk about that whole Brandeis connection that you had with him and just how everything evolved where you ended up working with him.
So I was the university photographer, but I also was able to take courses each semester, and I started taking what interested me, which was about sociology. My professor in 1995, January 95, happened to be a good friend of Morrie Schwartz. His name was Morrie Stein. And he talked about how his friend was learning to, live with ALS, with the deterioration of his body, and writing aphorisms. So we talked about that the first day of class, and then also the next day and the next day. And we were meditating on this as a class. And I was thinking, what should I do with this information? And I thought, well, I really don't think I know enough. So I learned with my camera, like it just feels like a little bit of a way to get into, learn more, be curious. And so I said to my professor, what do you think? And he's like, yes, that sounds so great. And then I reached out to Morrie Schwartz and he's like, oh, I've had attention, I don't know. And then the three of us talked together and there were parameters around it, which made sense. And so it was that his wife did not want to be part of any project. And that was actually true of Tuesdays with Morrie and of Newsweek Nightline. And that he could call it off at any time. That it would be my photographs paired with his aphorisms, and that he wanted to see a show before he died. I photographed for 6 months, put up a show in late September, and he died November 4th.
Yeah, considering that Morrie was the one that I wanted to have a living funeral, I could understand why he wanted to see the show before he died.
Yeah. I think he wanted to see that I did my homework too.
Yeah, well, absolutely. He wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that it was done according to Hoyle and according to his wishes and that the parameters were met. He had that scrutiny about him. He struck me as being somebody who paid attention to detail.
Yes. And it was such a departure because my whole master's thesis is about welfare and how mothers and their children are portrayed in the media, especially mainstream media in the 90s, which was really dishonest. I had to really I always was the one reaching out. They did not really reach out to me except for one who I photographed for 7 years. Morrie told me what was happening, which was great. And it was close. Where he lived was only 10 minutes away. So most of the time, the summer, I would take my lunch hour and go visit him, basically. And that's how I was able to do that in a relatively short time. And I didn't photograph a lot because it was almost always the same. It was the same house, pretty much, the same person. He was usually in this one room with all the books. I was trying to think of how to make it different. You don't want to hear click, click at a tender moment. So I didn't photograph much. I just was there. And when you're there and really listening, but then thinking, okay, there's something that's going to happen. And then getting into the photography part, just being ready for those moments.
Yeah, and I think end of life is such an intimate part of our lives, and where certain individuals just want certain private moments to be private.
Of
And
course.
it's good that you respected that because that also, I think there's an ethical code too, as well as, for the creative arts, as far as integrity and respecting a client's wishes in terms of what they want to have photographed, what they want to have made public. And I think the fact that you were very mindful of that was, I think, very key. And I think is a lesson for any photographer, anybody in the creative arts to really get a hold of it and to take to heart is that integrity is going to determine whether or not that person comes back. And
Yes, right.
and craft and how you do your craft with integrity, I think is the key. Beyond the talent, obviously. But you could have, there's a lot of talented individuals who don't have integrity, and those are individuals that probably aren't going to be able to sustain their creative art passions for too long based on that lack of integrity.
Yeah, and I really wanted, and it's hard because I'm thinking I am carrying, this legacy of somebody who, I care about, and I care about the family. And, so it's nice to be really friends with Morrie's sons and with especially Rob, who's been so
Hmm.
wonderful. And, and his extended family too. I do know some of them. And the feedback I've gotten is I'm so happy that this picture exists, that I was there to make that picture. And it's just that makes me as a photographer feel like, oh, it's all worth it.
What did you learn from Morrie? What was the biggest takeaway you took from the time that you spent with him about life, dying, and death?
Yeah, I was interested in the project. I mean, death, mainly because, I had thought a lot about it because as a growing up, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I had asthma. And so I was in the hospital for a lot of my childhood and thinking, wow, I might die. I just remember clearly thinking that. And I, Morrie had asthma as well. And so we connected on that level of like, breathing, living, dying. And when I came back from COVID, I came back from Brazil, I was living there, and I came back home for family reasons. And COVID, everybody's thinking about breathing and dying and living. And of course, that reminded me about what Morrie was saying. So now it's almost 30 years later, and I really had to think about what do I want to do if these are like my last breaths. He did say things that really stuck in my mind at the time. I know these aren't his words, but love each other or die. And I remember thinking, wow, that's so extreme. But he said that, and it made me think, like, is that correct? Like, love each other, like, are those our choices? But I think he's right in a lot of ways, and that we need each other. And so, like, in these times, I mean, it's just we need his messages. I mean, I think we've gotten so far away from what a lot of philosophers are saying. He was just this sweet man with a terminal illness and speaking from what he was experiencing. And yeah, he was I that's what I really remember about him, how wonderful and generous and loving he was.
Yeah, so he did something in the 90s that wasn't something that was commonly done in Western society. I mean, he
Absolutely.
let millions of people witness his dying process, and he became the consummate teacher at the end of life in terms of this is how you die. But what he taught us more is in terms of this is how you live while you're dying. This is how you make your mark. This is how you leave your legacy. And it was unheard of because death was such a taboo topic. And in many ways, it still is in our society. I mean, we're getting better talking about it, but it's not something that you see as far as dinner table conversation or something that's brought up in the course of family dynamics and interaction. So the fact that he did this and said, look, I'm going to be very open with my dying process.
Mhm.
Um, at that point, I think that just made his legacy even more long lasting because he did something that wasn't commonly done.
Yeah, I really appreciated it then, but now that I'm 30 years older than that, it just really resonates. Like how I don't know, just wise. I
Mhm.
just feel like he was really wise. He was just sharing. what he was learning. And of course, all those books on the wall he read them. He really just was a wonderful, I just really enjoyed, and I don't think that happens often. He was extroverted and he just loved people, and it was really an honor to be around him.
But if there was 3 people that I would have liked to meet before they died, Morrie Schwartz would have been one of them.
Oh,
And because, I mean, his teachings inform how I teach as well, too. He influences a lot of building connectivity in the classroom, developing positive relationships with students, understanding that they have lives beyond the student role and being able to create space for that and hold space for that. All of that resonates with me, because of his philosophies as an educator.
yeah. And I'd love to show you some photographs.
Absolutely. Tell us about your monograph, Memento Morrie, Images of Love and Loss, what
Okay.
you want readers to take away from it, and also to share some of your favorite photos from the project.
Well, perfect. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. Right. Okay. So this is the book. And for those who maybe have remembered Latin, Memento Mori literally means remember death. And so memento, remember, and Mori, M-O-R-I, is death. But it's not in that morbid way. It's the idea of remember death so that you don't forget to live your life fully. And this was my first, the reason why is I've photographed, which I was explaining earlier about that we both had COVID and then asthma, and then the COVID really, I started dreaming about Morrie because I think I was just back where my negatives were in the basement of my house.
Hmm.
And I thought, those are really beautiful images, and I just needed to get them out, look them over again, and then see what else I had. So this is the very first picture I took. And Morrie loved it, which was great. And you can see it actually on his bookshelf, which is really very cool. But I remember thinking, I should really ask him to take it down, and I'm glad I didn't, because I'll show it to you in maybe another picture. The most important thing in life is to learn how to give out love and to let it come in. It's just such a beautiful sentiment.
And I'll tell you, Heather, when I ask my students, they do an integrative course assignment on Tuesdays with Morrie, and they integrate excerpts from the book with course concepts. One of the questions I will ask them is, what's the biggest teaching that you took away from Tuesdays with Morrie? And more often than not, that aphorism comes into play.
Yeah, yeah. And it's one thing to read it, it's another thing to live it. And this was my professor who talked about what Morrie was learning. And if you can see that picture is on that bookshelf.
Mm-hmm.
And I love this one too. And he said this to Ted Koppel about Morrie Stein, who had hearing loss and he had losing his voice. We will hold hands and there will be love passing between us. You don't need speech or hearing to communicate love. It's another beautiful picture. And I have so many pictures. I actually have like 3 pictures of them holding hands. And so it was a tough choice, but this is the one that made it into the book. And so, as I had said, the project was about my photographs paired with his aphorisms. And so he gave this to me, and I still have it. And then my photographs, and this is at Brandeis in September 95. And then as you had said, how it all really started was Morrie Stein suggested to the Boston Globe, to a writer I think he knew, Jack Thomas, to write this story. And that's how it was Ted Koppel's producer who lived in Marblehead, so he always got the Boston Globe. And that's how he found this story and then found Morrie. And then, as you already know, he was on Nightline for 3 times. And then also Ted Koppel finished his final show. He could have talked about anybody, but he ended up talking about Morrie because it's such a perennial topic and heartwarming story. And because of Nightline, that's how his former student, Mitch Albom, found his former professor, who he was planning to keep in touch with, and 16 years had gone by. And so he was just going to call him up and say, I saw you on Nightline, and I'm so sorry that you have ALS. And Morrie said, please come visit. And so it was on a Tuesday. And then, as luck would have it, the Detroit Free Press went on strike. So it was kind of like this whole fortuitous circle that happened swirled all around this story. And that's how Mitch Albom was able to come and visit for 14 Tuesdays. And then it was published, it was going to be a small run, but then Oprah had Mitch on her show and then produced a movie and then the play in 2002. And now Tuesdays with Morrie is one of the biggest memoirs, I think maybe the biggest memoir, in 45 languages in 20 million copies. Back to me and COVID. So this was my first film that I took from a camera. So this is actually the cover. And you can see that I really use every little bit of you really should be using frame 1, but I used frame 0. And then this is the one that Morrie liked so much. But what I'm kind of saying with this film strip is that there's a range of emotion. And so sometimes it looks like he's so happy but he has difficult times. And so when I read Sacred Bullet by Ron Hoffman, who now runs Compassionate Care ALS on Cape Cod, he mentions Morrie on like page 210 or something. That says, and he asks, I wonder if Morrie had long nights of fear and loneliness, and what was the impact on Morrie's family and friends and on caregiving and on spirituality. And I thought, well, I can answer those questions with my photographs.
Yeah, you mentioned Mitch Albom and Oprah. Rob had reminded me during our interview, he had asked me, do you know how and I'm paraphrasing this, when the book took off? And I had forgotten that it was Mitch Albom and Oprah. And then once Mitch Albom got on Oprah, I mean, the book just skyrocketed as far as sales, and it became, like you said, probably the best-selling memoir of all time.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And looking back, and actually Rob has said this, I think it's just so accessible. It's not a big, long read. It's full of heart, and it's just very easy to access. So, and I'm thrilled that high schoolers are reading it and your students are reading it. I think that's pretty cool.
As long as I'm teaching death, dying, and bereavement at Utica University, Morrie's going to always be part of the curriculum.
Yeah. The Harley School in Rochester, New York, they do a whole thing, and they're doing a sort of what's called a week without walls and coming to Cape Cod. And I will be showing my work to high school students. And also, I teach at Needham High School. I found a teacher who does the same, teaches Tuesdays with Morrie, and I'm hoping to talk to some students there too. I think it's so important, actually. I mean, we're all going to get there. So just sort of facing death really helps you to like learning about it, being curious. Well, later on, I have spirituality picture and Morrie's. Let me see if I can find it. So that's Morrie dancing. That's so fun. And that's my favorite picture. One of my favorite pictures. I love this one because I think he looks like so at peace. And the spirituality is here. I know it's here. That one. And what he says is the meditation teacher says, maybe death is not a big chasm. Maybe it's just a little bridge. And I love that. But Morrie said, well, I'd like to think of it that way. And it's just, because you don't know. And so maybe it's not the big wide chasm that you think it is. Maybe it's not as scary. Maybe. So maybe going back a little bit, but here's the structure of the book, which is themes of building a caring community, family, friends, caregiving, self-care, spirituality, and in death and beyond. And I thought my photographs would fit in well with under these, and I think this is really what Morrie would endorse as themes. And then Ted Koppel, I did send Ted a book, and he said that really Morrie was the indefatigable prophet of optimism and joy, and I think that's sweet, and how much there is to be reminded about life and love for which we must be grateful. And that's Rob with him. And then this is the building a caring community, and I love this photograph because there's so much going on and it's joyful. And I think when you do get people together, it's effort, but it's always effort that's worth it. And I think this was the purpose was actually to talk about either he had a politics group and he also had a death and spirituality group. And I think Rob would say he had a couple more too, but yeah. A couple of my professors. There's that's Gordy Fellman. Okay. And that's Rob Schwartz with his father, which is really a sweet photograph. I love this photograph too. It's just so tender, and like his hand around Rob's arm is so like just that's so beautiful.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite photos in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. And then this one gets a lot of attention, and I just love it because it's joyful. And Charlie Derber, who is the friend, said, "This is a picture of the heart. Two men who love each other. They're facing each other and like interacting, because a lot of times men sort of are side by side and watching or doing something or sports or, so this is definitely a little just slice of really this amazing moment. And then the caregiving. And yeah, it was hard, but it can be done with care. And I thought Morrie, like this last picture, I love it because it's about care and it's also a hug. And it's almost like who's giving who a hug. And so in the beginning, at the end of life, we need others to survive. But here's the secret: in between, we need others as well. He said, "The reason I agreed to expose my dying from ALS to the public is that I wanted to stimulate in people a greater awareness of our common humanity by looking into that most human experience, dying and death. I do so in the hope that this will evoke more compassion for oneself and for others." I've visited his grave a few times, and also Charlotte, his wife, died in 2021, so she lived quite a bit longer. And I do go there and I actually talk, and I feel like they're listening. And that's what he would say. He would tell people, "Come bring a sandwich. You talk, I'll listen." Really a fun little thing to do at a gravesite.
Look, I truly believe in continued bonds after a person dies. I think one of Morrie Schwartz's, most quoted sayings is death ends a life, not a relationship. And
Yeah,
just because the person is not here physically doesn't mean we still can't have a relationship with that person.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think yeah, I don't know, there's something about, just feeling their guidance, presence, and maybe it's like in your head or maybe it's like in the universe or something, but it just feels like there's some kind of, I don't know, influence for sure.
Well, I think the people that come into our lives when they die, we have the option to take the best parts of who they were and make them part of us. That's how we move through
Yes.
grief. That's how we integrate grief. The people that Morrie touched in his life, they're going to carry a part of him with him, and his legacy is going to live on through them.
Yeah.
Oh, these are great pictures.
Thank you. Yeah. I think that was, oh, and so the book has 44 photographs, and for those people who are photographers, duotone is it's black and white but also a gray, and so it's high quality photographs and published by Daylight Books in last July 2024. There are 7 of Morrie's aphorisms along with the themes, and then there are 4 essays. So Rob Schwartz wrote the foreword, and then there's Dr. Stanley Appel, who is a renowned researcher and neurologist on ALS, and then Anita Hanig, who is the author of The Day I Die, and she was also an associate professor at Brandeis, and she has a journal coming out, or I think it did come out, My Death Diary, a guided journal for mortals. She has found the same thing about, like, we need to talk more about death, and she compares it to a lot of places around the world. And then there's Richard Harris, who was the producer for Nightline, and he's been such a wonderful friend and supporter, advocate. And sadly, he died last September. So I was grateful to get these 4 outstanding essays by really, I mean, they're really, all 4 of them are amazing, and get them when I did, and get those photographs when I did. So yeah, now it's all in Memento Morrie.
Yeah, I think the essays really added a lot of context, a lot of richness to the work that you did with Morrie. I just think it's a great piece of work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
It's, yeah, Morrie, he didn't pretend to be anything other than what he was. And I just feel like it's so authentic and from the heart.
Yep. My impression is what you saw with him was what you got. There was no pretense. It was genuine.
Absolutely. Yeah. Another thing he said, and I have it here, neither money nor power will give you the feeling you're looking for, no matter how much of it you have. And I thought that was pretty salient advice.
Yes, Morrie had his own views about the culture. He thought the culture was too focused on money and possessions when it should be about defining our own subculture based on love, companionship, community, not buy into the dominant Western society narrative of what culture should look like.
Yes. We will see. But I think we're all going to get there, because what are the choices? I think getting back to that love each other or die
Yeah,
thing.
I agree.
Uh,
Well, thank you. These are great pictures.
I appreciate this opportunity, and so great to talk to your listeners and also meet you, because I know now we're friends on social media, and yeah, maybe soon in person, because I'll be in Utica this summer.
Yeah, please look me up and
Absolutely.
and if the stars align, we can meet.
That'd be great. They will align. We'll make them align.
All right. Those are great pictures, and thank you for sharing those with our audience. Those are very intimate end of life pictures and an intimate look at an end of life journey, and that you captured it so beautifully.
Thank you.
One of my final questions for you this evening is that if you're going to leave our listeners, Heather, with just one thing today, what would that be?
I think it's about building community and all the themes that Morrie, to live a fulfilling life. You know, I think there's a lot of heartache and trying to get to that place where there's some forgiveness, where there's some genuine friendship. It takes work. It's not easy. And, family, friends, and take care of yourself. That's part of love, and take care of others if you can. Spirituality piece, I think people find it in different ways, and it's okay to find it in, nature, to find it in religion, to find it in just searching. I think Morrie would say, enjoy the search. And I think that's such a lovely way to think about it.
Well, particularly now, there's so many different spiritual practices, and spirituality, or a person's sense of spirituality, is such an individualized piece anyway. I mean, some individuals will seek spiritual awareness in nature, others through yoga, others through meditation, others through journaling, and it all works. It's what works for them, and how can we understand what works for them so that we can align with it, understand it, and perhaps even take some bits and pieces from their spiritual journey that we can integrate into our own.
I think people will be calmer because I just feel a lot of angst around. I think it's time to just breathe.
Yeah, and I think studies have shown that spiritual practices, most spiritual practices, really can help people improve their physical health, their mental health outlook. So that in and of itself, a high sense of spiritual awareness can be protective against mental illness, perhaps, and also increase our physical health care outcomes too. As I've gotten older, I believe there's both a place for science and spirituality as it informs our physical and our mental health.
Yes, right. And, if you don't really have your health, life really does become a lot harder. And that means taking care of yourself, of your environment, so many things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Heather, my last question for you this evening is, if listeners want to purchase Memento Morrie, they want to find out more about your services, find out where you're going to be as far as with your talks related to Memento Morrie, how can they find out that information?
So I have a newsletter that I don't send out all that often, but probably at least once a month. So sign up for that on my website, heatherpillar.com, HEATHER, Pillar, PILLAR.com. That's really the best way. You can send me a message as well through my website. Go visit, and there's photographs, more photographs than what I showed on the website, and also a couple of audio files. The book has way more photographs plus the essays.
Yeah, and I'm going to display my copy for everybody, just so you know that I do have this. It is a great book. It's a great tribute to Morrie Schwartz's legacy, a great photographic journal and essays to go with it. Purchase this book. It'll give you and your family lasting memories and preserve the legacy of a man who truly was a visionary and was a man ahead of his time.
Well, thank you. I think that book really is about going back to it. It's like Tuesdays with Morrie. You can read it again and again, and you can really look again and again at those photographs and see something different each time. The other thing I wanted to just mention is that I do have some postcards that are, you can have them here, but they are like this. It has his aphorism, but it's kind of fun. So if you do, they're on my website, they're like $6 or each, or $5 for $25 or something like that. And then you can, but it's so nice. This is a great way to start, to reach out to somebody. And, I think it's so much fun to get something in the mail, because we don't do that anymore. Send postcards but you can also, it comes with envelopes too. So anyway, getting like real mail again, I think would be a great thing to do.
Yes, snail mail seems to be a thing of the past in this world of advanced technology with emails and text messages and other forms of electronic communications. I think old school is good. I think technology is good, but I think having the traditional ways to integrate with that, I think is priceless for me. So, Heather, thank you so much for spending time with me tonight.
Thank you.
And I so enjoyed our conversation. I hope we can do this again in the future.
Yes, I will see you this summer.
You got it. That is a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.